I'm going to tell you something, a personal story. You can call it a testimony if you want to. I know that the scriptures are full of stories about the children of God and some of the things they've encountered, some of the things that they've done, some of the events they've been involved in. And I want to share with you part of my misadventures to Phoenix. Now, about 60 years before I went to Phoenix this time, I went there with my mother and my twin brother and my sister to visit my grandmother. Now, I remember beautiful scenery somewhere. I'm not sure where we were at, but I think it was in Arizona, and we were riding the tracks right along the beautiful river with the water flowing over the rocks and mountains on both sides, and it was just beautiful. And this trip didn't have anything that was beautiful. We went right through the deserts, all the way from around El Paso, all the way through New Mexico and Arizona. Nothing but desert. Very little vegetation. I mean, it was just not beautiful at all. But that was the least of the thing. I still was enjoying the fact that I was on a train. First night I was on there, I froze. I mean, I just literally could not sleep because it was just so cold. Everybody else I could see were veterans of a train because they all had blankets, and they were all sleeping. Okay. So down in the cafe, I noticed that it was much warmer down there than it was anywhere else in the train. So I got the bright idea the second night, because it took 47 hours to get there. I had the bright idea that I'd go down in the cafe and I would try to sleep. And I did. I slept for a little bit. Long enough that instead of getting off in Phoenix, I was in Yuma, Arizona when I woke up. Now, this was, I think, around midnight or later. I think it was after midnight. And I went to one of the attendants there, and I told him that I needed to get off the train in Maricopa. Because a kid behind me in the cafe said he thinks that it already stopped at Maricopa, and we were farther away from there than I wanted to know. And sure enough, he told me, he said, well, we stopped at Maricopa a good long way back. And here we are in Yuma. So he led me to the conductor. And the conductor, he said, oh my. He said, we tried to avoid this, okay? But he said, I don't know. He said, I really don't know. And he looked out, he just really blew me off because he looked out and he saw this sheriff's deputy over there talking to some people at the train depot in Yuma, Arizona. And he says, go to that man there, he can help you. Not. I went to him and he says, oh no. He says, I don't know. He says, you may have to take a taxi. Well, 181 miles on a taxi, can you imagine what it would cost? So that, I just blew that off right away. And he said, man, I don't know. He said, the bus station's closed. And, all the rental car places are closed. And he looked over across the road over there. He said, there's 2 bars over there. Probably should have spent the night there. No, he said, go over there. There are usually taxi cabs sitting there waiting for the patrons to come out and drive them home. Well, I got over there and there was no taxis. I went inside and there was this young couple sitting here and an older couple at the bar. And I could tell they really felt a lot of empathy toward me when I told them the situation and I was trying to get back to Phoenix. But they couldn't help me. It's like the song. I know a man that can, but this came to me a lot later than maybe what it should have. So anyway, I'm like, oh no, what am I going to do? So I walk down across from the train depot, and I'm carrying this heavy duffel bag, and I see a bench in front of a building there, and I just sit down on that bench, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I need to be in Phoenix at 9 o'clock the next morning, And here I am 181 miles away with no transportation. So I sat there a while, I guess feeling sorry for myself, and then I got up, and on the way to the bars over there, I saw a taxi cab. The light was lit up with his number on it, but there was nobody in it. So I get my cell phone out and I call the number. And the guy says, well, I'll be there in a little bit. And sure enough, just a few minutes, he was there with his wife, and they picked me up, a couple of Hispanic people, nice people. And he took me to where the bus stops. Now, there's nothing there but a bench and, a little shelter. And he says, now, you'll have to have a ticket or they won't let you on the bus. He said, there's a 1-800 number there. You can call that. So I'm on the phone. They put me on hold for a long time, so I just hung up. I called back, and this older man, I could tell by his voice, we got to the point where I was giving him my credit card information, about to purchase the ticket, and the call dropped. The call dropped. Of all times I could have a call drop, it did it then. And naturally, when I called back, I couldn't get the same person. I got a woman who I could not understand. She was not American. She was a foreigner with a... She got frustrated with me. She said, just pay the bus driver $46 and you can be on your way. Now, the bus is about to arrive, maybe 20 minutes. I told her, I said, well, the sign here where I'm sitting says you can't get on the bus unless you have a ticket. Oh, she said, he'll take it. Okay. So the bus comes, and myself and this young lady that was waiting there with her husband and their child, we all went to get on the bus, and I approached the bus driver, and I said, I need to purchase a ticket to Phoenix, Arizona. He says, I can't take money. I said, well, your associate on the phone just told me that you could take the money and I could get a ride back to Phoenix. And he says, I'm not going to Phoenix. I thought, oh boy, this is great. This is great. So I'm thinking, well, I need to get online. So I pull out my computer, and I find all these Wi-Fi spots all around me. I didn't know any of the passwords. I went through a bunch of them trying to guess the passwords, and of course, I didn't find any. But I noticed one of the Wi-Fi's was over down the block a ways at an all-night fitness center. So I'm thinking, well, they can help me, like the song. So I went over there and kind of explained what had happened to me, and I said, may I use your Wi-Fi to purchase a ticket and print it off? And he says, we don't have Wi-Fi. He just didn't want me to use it. I mean, I knew he was lying because I saw it. I saw the Wi-Fi on my computer. So at this time, it's getting close to 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. I think it was around 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, I'm in a strange town. I didn't know anyone, didn't know where anything was, and I needed to get back to Phoenix. So at this point in time, I was walking, and I had this heavy duffel bag on my shoulder, and it was dark, and I began to think about, well, you know, I'm really vulnerable out here in the middle of the morning or night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I mean, I got to thinking about, well, somebody could mug me, and I got to think, well, I'm not going to give them the money, and I thought, well, you probably throw the wallet at them if they actually pull a gun on you or something. I mean, all these things were going through my head. And at that moment was when I felt despair. Like there was nobody there that was going to help me. Like the song. And so I realized at that point that there was nothing that I was doing that was working, and I had to call on God. But I didn't feel worthy. Because I was some old man going to pick up a toy that I wanted. One that I fell in love with when they first came out in 55, 56, and 57. The little Thunderbird with the porthole window. I mean, I've been enamored to those porthole windows ever since I first saw one. Here I am in the middle of nowhere, something that I've done to myself, And the first words out of my mouth was, "Father, I know I don't deserve it." And I felt like I didn't. But I said, "I need some help." And I took another step or two, and just a peaceful calm came over me. And approximately the same moment that I felt that peace and calm, I looked up and there was a motel several blocks down the road. So I thought, I could probably get some help there. So here I'm walking with that duffel bag in the dark at night, and I'm getting tired. I hadn't slept much on the train at all. And I got to the motel, and I went in. There was an older gentleman there. And I began to explain to him what had took place and that I needed some help. And I said, "May I borrow your computer and printer and purchase and print off a ticket to ride the bus?" He said, "Yeah." And I thought, well, I'm in good shape now. So I went online, I purchased a ticket, I printed it off, and I walked back down to the bus stop. There was a large black man sitting there, and he was scratching some scratch-off tickets. He purchased some tickets for the lottery, whatever. And I saw it, and I said something to him about the tickets, and he mumbled something. I can't remember what it was. I sat down beside him, and then, you're going to make some conversation, so I asked him where he was headed. He said, "I'm going to Phoenix." I said, "Well, I'm going there too." And I asked him, I said, "Do you live there?" And he said, "Yes, I do." And then he said this, "Actually, I just got out of prison." And I'm this close to asking him, is this the point where I should start running? I'm punch drunk, or whatever you call it. I'm numb, I'm tired, and I just, but I didn't ask him, and he turned out to be a nice young man. The bus comes, and now my ticket was for 11-something in the morning, almost noon. And here it was like 2:45 at night. And the bus came, and I got my duffel bag, and I said, "This may be the point where I need to get out my cane and plea for sympathy." And that young man laughed. I said, "You got to use all the things that you can have to, at your ability to do." So I got the cane out, the one that Calvin gave me, and I proceed up there with my duffel bag and my cane. I give the paper to the bus driver, and he looks at it and he says, "What's your name?" And I told him my name. He said, "Board." I got on. And I'm going to have to throw a little humor in this because it's the way I felt. It's my personal story. It's the way I felt at that point in time. We're on the bus and we haven't gone anywhere, and he pulls over the side of the road, and I'm thinking, there's nothing here. This is not a bus stop. What is he pulling over for? Well, he stops and he opens the door up and he goes out. And at that point in time, three, what do you call those people that? Border Patrol, with their big hog legs on their side. 3 Border Patrol boarded the bus, and they asked for everybody's ID. Or I thought that's what they asked for. But actually they were just wanting the Hispanic people to show them their ID to make sure they were legal citizens. I started getting mine out, and my crazy sense of humor, I'm coming this close to singing to, to the Border Patrolman, "I was born in East L.A." I don't know if any of you have heard that song by Chong, I believe it was, Cheech or Chong, Cheech Marriott, where they're asking him for his green card, in L.A., and he's trying to tell him, said, "Man, I was born in East L.A." But this guy didn't look like he had a sense of humor at that point in time. He was real serious, and he's probably thinking, well, somebody could, that was not a legal citizen could pull a gun on him or whatever. So I didn't sing it. I didn't get any sleep because the window that I'm sitting next to is just rattling all night long. I get back to Phoenix at 7:30 in the morning. I got my business taken care of. The most pleasant part of it was going to the dealership and dealing with those people. But I had gotten to the point where I was like the words in this song. When you feel no one can help you and your life is out of hand, I know a man who can. And even though I really felt like that I'm not worthy to have your help because this is something that I've done to myself, I got myself into it, it was just to get a toy. Nothing that I needed, but something that I wanted. But he did help. So I'd like to go to the book of Proverbs, the 3rd chapter, to go along with this message today. I want to read just a few verses out of the book of Proverbs, the 3rd chapter. And I'll begin in verse 5. This is a very familiar scripture. Notice what it says. Trust in God with all of your heart and lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. The word direct means to make things right. And the word path means road. He will direct you on your road. And brothers and sisters, I was on a road and a ride that I wasn't ready for. But it says here, it does not matter, that he will direct your paths on this road. And down in verse 13, he says, happy is the man that finds wisdom and the man that gets understanding. Wisdom here means who has some skillful, wisely, wit, skillful, wisely, and wit. And it reminds me of something that Jesus said in the New Testament, and I think I've got it in my notes. We'll get to it a little bit later. But it's like, okay, lean on God, ask him for help, and he will give you the wits to see through a problem like I had, or a problem that you had. And I don't know about you folks, but I really like the personal stories that I've heard in the church over the years. I'll never forget most of them, and I remember yours. You were up north somewhere, and he had this splitting headache. I mean, it was just hammering his head, and he felt terrible. This is Marvin. And he said at that time, he says, God, if you will take this headache away from me, I'll work for you. I'll be a servant for you the rest of my life. And you know, shortly after that, he came into the Church of God, started attending service with us over at, I think it was the bingo hall. And he and I were baptized on the same day. Beg your pardon? VFW, right? Yeah, VFW, that's right. Bingo hall was on New Boston Road. But I never forgot that story because it was something personal. It was something that happened to him, and it was something that he asked for. And God gave it to him. And he made good on his vow to serve him the rest of his life. Now that hits me here. I like the personal stories. Now, I used to love to hear Charles Gross give those personal stories that he would read about or he was encountered with. I remember one where he had this neighbor that cut his grass and slung all of his grass over on his driveway. And he asked him not to do it, but he continued to do it. So he asked us the question, what would you do? And then he went on with the rest of the message. So I remember these things, and I hope maybe you can relate to some of these things that I'm going to speak about today. I'll read verse 13 again. Happy is the man that finds wisdom, that has some skill, that's wise, that's witty, or has, you know, they will say, has these good wits about him or whatever. Verse 14, for the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain therefore than fine gold. The fact of the matter is, I could have had a pocket full of gold and found nobody to help me. It was just that I come to the conclusion that nobody's going to help me in this town. And so I reached out to God, and he did help me. And I'll never forget that either. I can tell you more, I can tell you for sure. I'll never forget it. Verse 15 says, she is more precious than rubies. Talking about wisdom, the skill, this wit about you. And all the things you can desire are not to be compared unto her. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are the ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. Now, I didn't feel any peace until I said, Father, I know I'm not worthy, but I need help. And it kind of reminds me of, and I'm not relating to it, but it just reminds me of the story where the man went into the temple And he didn't look up. He beat himself in the chest and says, Father, I'm a sinner. And he went away justified. And he went away probably with peace in his heart. In verse 18 it says, she is a tree of life to them that lay hold upon her, and happy is everyone that retains her. Now, again, there was a point, actually there were several points in that adventure of mine, or misadventures, that I really felt like that things weren't going to turn out well for me, and that something terrible could happen to me. I mean, I was very vulnerable. I felt very vulnerable. He goes on to say in verse 21, my son, let them not depart from your eyes. Keep sound wisdom and discretion. I tried everything that I knew, and it was not working. So shall they be life unto your soul and grace to your neck. Then shall you walk in the way safely, and your foot shall not stumble. I can't tell you how good it felt when I felt that peace after the prayer, because I realized that God was touching me and that I was going to get some help. And I was going to find my way back to Phoenix and back home to my wife. Now, she knew of none of this because I wouldn't tell her about it until I got back and she saw that I was safe and sound. But then I told her about it. She says, you're not ever going again. But I'm not wanting to take a train ride. Trust me, I don't recommend it for anybody, unless you just like to ride trains. I love to ride trains, but that trip was not a lovely situation. He continues by saying, so shall your life, so shall they be life unto your soul and grace to your neck. Then you shall walk in the way safely, and your foot shall not stumble. I guess I've already read that. When you lie down, you shall not be afraid. Yea, you shall lie down, and your sleep shall be sweet. Be not afraid of sudden fear, neither of desolation of the wicked when it comes. For God shall keep your confidence, and he shall keep your foot from being taken. The word foot here means journey. And I can relate to it after this journey that I took. And when you know God is working on your side, you're working for you. I wish I could explain the calm and peace that you have when you know that. Because I was doing all the right things. I was getting online and I was trying to find a place where I could get a ticket. I was trying to find help from the policeman, from the conductor, from the people in the bar. I was looking for somebody to help me. I'd already been told that the bus station was closed and all the places where you could rent a car were closed. I had very little options. So that's when I started working on it. And again, until the fact that I knew that God was helping me, I did not feel that I was going to be successful in finding a way back to Phoenix, Arizona. But I did. God is gracious. Matthew, the 10th chapter. In Matthew, the 10th chapter, I'd like to begin in verse 16. Read of this situation here. He's telling his disciples here, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. I can kind of relate to that. I feel like I'm one of God's sheep, one of his disciples, a brother of Jesus Christ. But I didn't feel like I was surrounded by sheep at all. I didn't necessarily feel like I was surrounded by wolves, but I could relate to this scripture because here I was, not knowing the town, knowing no one there, just felt like I was in the wilderness with no hope. Be you therefore wise as serpents. And the word means, it's through the idea, that is serpents, through the idea of sharpness of vision. Now, I had seen the motels before I prayed. I saw them. Nothing ever registered. I had a hotel waiting for me back in Phoenix. Never got to spend the night there. But until I prayed, it didn't dawn on me to go to one of those places and ask for help to print a ticket out. But after I prayed, that was the first thing I saw when I looked up. And it was a ray of hope. A sign said, hotel. It was like the lighthouse. You know, when the sailors were in bad weather, they looked for a lighthouse in its place of safety. He says here, I'm going to send you out in places that aren't safe. But he said, verse 17, but beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils, and they will scourge you in the synagogues. And you shall be brought before governors and kings for my sake, for a testimony against them and the Gentiles. Now, whoever these people are, whoever they were in a situation where they needed somebody to help them. And as this song says, there was no one until they thought about God. Verse 19, but when they deliver you up to take, you should take no thought on how or what you shall speak, for it shall be given you in that same hour what you shall speak. For it is not you that speak, but the Spirit of your Father which speaks in you. And it goes on to talk about a lot of other situations that these people are going to find themselves in, and God is going to help them. Brother against brother, and so on and so forth. They're in a dire straits. Verse 24 tells us, the disciple is not above the teacher, nor the servant above his master. I have got the feeling that God allowed me to fall asleep and put me in a place where I wasn't supposed to be. Now, that's my thoughts. Now, whether that's true or not, I can't tell you. But I'll believe that probably till I go to my grave. That He allowed this to show me that, all the things you want in life are not all the things that you need. And you can be a foolish old man looking for a piece of past history and fall into the prey of others. And I felt vulnerable. I really did. But he says, we're not above our master. It is enough, verse 25, that the disciple, that he be as his teacher and the servant as his master. If they call the master of the house Beelzebub, how much more shall they call them of his household? But he says, fear them not, therefore, for there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, and hid that shall not be known. Truth of the matter is, whatever difficulty we find ourselves in, there's always somebody that can. No matter the situation. And I knew, really, in my heart, I knew that I wasn't worthy to ask God. But I said, for your loving kindnesses and tender mercy's sake, I need your help. And what a wonderful comfort it was when I knew I had it. I just knew that when I went to that hotel, that I was going to get a ticket and be on the bus back to Phoenix. I just knew it. In Matthew 7, I thank God I didn't have to ride that train back another 47 hours. Oh, gosh. If you ride on the train, take your own blankets. In Matthew the 7th chapter, I want to begin in verse 24. Therefore, whosoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him unto a wise man which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came down, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. Now, in all of this situation, I never lost my wits. The only time that I felt like, really, what am I going to do, was sitting there on that bench, feeling sorry for myself, across from the train depot. And I realized then, Ron, you cannot feel sorry for yourself. You've got to get up from here and try something. And after that, although they didn't work, I never lost my wits. I never got panicky. I was just concerned that I was in a strange place, vulnerable, and couldn't find nobody to help me. But he says here, if you base your spiritual foundation upon this rock, that is Christ. Verse 26, everyone that hears these sayings of mine and does them not shall be likened to a foolish man which built his house upon the sand. And when these rains descended and the floods came and the winds blew and beat upon that house and it fell, and a great was the fall of it. And it came to pass, when God had ended these sayings, the people were astonished at his doctrine, for he taught them as one having authority and not as scribes. I really felt like the authority of God worked with me with that old man. I felt like that maybe he was an angel in disguise. That's what I'm going to call him anyway. Or to me, he was an angel. In Matthew 24, verse 6, it's talking about all the different things that are going to take place just before Christ comes back. We've read these scriptures many times, but I want you to think about it again. It says, see that you be not troubled. Now, fear can stifle you. Fear can make you where you don't think straight, where you can't accomplish anything. And I knew that that was not going to do me any good for me to get so frightened that I was not going to be able to even have my wits about me. But now let's go to 2 Timothy 1. There's many scriptures that come to mind. One of them is that God will never put it on us any more than we can handle. Even though it looks like that things are going to be terrible, God can work these things out. We remember to pray to him. 2 Timothy, the first chapter, in verse 5. When I call to remembrance the unfeigned faith that is in you, which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded that in you also. Wherefore I put you in remembrance that you stir up the gift of God which is in you by the putting on of hands. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. When these situations come, there's nothing more valuable than keeping a sound mind and not becoming panicky and losing your wits about you. I want to close now with Exodus 14th chapter. Exodus 14. This is a scripture I've used years ago when it was the Passover season, because this is so relevant to our lives, some of the situations we've gotten ourselves into, some of the situations that just time and chance take us to. And this is a scripture that probably every one of us should keep in mind when that happens. When you come to your crossroads, when you come to your great difficulty, when you come to your Red Sea, if you will, when you come to the rains that are beating against you, when you have the difficulty, when you're being persecuted, when all these troubles that you've been going through are just worrying on your mind, remember these words of Moses, of God. In Exodus, the 14th chapter, verse 13. And Moses said unto the people, fear you not, stand still and see the salvation of God, which he shall show you today. For the Egyptians who you have seen today, you shall see them again no more forever. He says, God shall fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. I feel very blessed to be back here among people who love me, that I know that if I ask for help, I would receive it. I feel so grateful that I'm not still in Yuma, and that I didn't have to take the bus ride back, but I got to ride the toy.